I'm Christina, 28, a software engineer in Seattle who built her career from scratch. My journey through college was a financial nightmare because my parents refused to help. The irony. Now they're calling me for a $30,000 loan to save their house. The same people who left me drowning in student debt now expect me to bail them out. That moment when my father called with his entitled request left me speechless. If you're watching this, please let me know where you're from. In the comments, hit that like and subscribe button and stick around to hear how I finally stood up for myself. My childhood in Portland, Oregon looked normal from the outside. We lived in a comfortable two-story house in a decent neighborhood with my parents, David and Nancy, and my younger brother, Jackson. My father worked as a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, and my mother was an administrative assistant at a local community college. We never struggled financially during my childhood, which makes what happened later even more frustrating. Growing up, my parents always emphasized the importance of independence. "You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, Christina," my father would say while helping me with homework. Looking back now, I realized there was a significant difference between teaching independence and abandoning responsibility. But I wouldn't understand that distinction until much later. From an early age, I showed aptitude for mathematics and science. My teachers often told my parents I had exceptional problem-solving abilities. While they smiled and nodded during parent-teacher conferences, they never seemed as enthusiastic about my achievements as I hoped. By contrast, whenever Jackson brought home even average grades in sports, the celebration was immediate and extravagant. "Your brother needs more encouragement," my mother would explain when I questioned the difference in treatment. "You're naturally gifted, Christina. You don't need the same kind of support." Despite the uneven attention, I poured myself into academics. By high school, I had fallen in love with computer science. My dream was to study at the University of Washington, which had one of the best programs in the country. I researched everything about their computer science department connected with alumni on social media and visited the campus twice. This wasn't just a casual interest for me. It was the foundation for the future I envisioned. Meanwhile, our family continued living quite comfortably. My parents remodeled the kitchen when I was 15, bought new cars every 4 years, and took annual vacations to places like Hawaii and Mexico. Jackson always received the latest gaming systems and sports equipment. Money never seemed to be an issue. I started working part-time at 16 first at a local grocery store and later at a coffee shop. Unlike my friends who spent their paychecks on clothes and concerts, I saved nearly every penny. My parents had never explicitly discussed college funding with me, but given their emphasis on education and our comfortable lifestyle, I assumed they had a plan. Still, I wanted to contribute to my education and build that independence they valued so much. The truth came crashing down during the spring of my junior year. I was looking for gardening gloves in our shed when I found a financial folder my father had apparently forgotten to take back inside. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it to find documents about various investments and college savings plans with Jackson's name prominently featured. My name was nowhere to be found. Confused and concerned, I approached my parents that evening after dinner. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where they had helped me with countless homework assignments over the years. "I found some paperwork in the shed," I began cautiously, "about college savings. I wanted to ask about my account." My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "What account are you referring to, Christina?" my father asked, his voice unnaturally formal. "My college savings. I saw the plans for Jackson, but I couldn't find mine." Another look between them before my mother spoke. "Honey, we haven't set up a specific account for you." "But Jackson has one," I said, confusion evident in my voice. "Your brother's situation is different," my father explained in a matter-of-fact tone. "We started his fund more recently when we were in a better financial position. And frankly, we expect he might need more support than you." "What about me? I'm applying to colleges next year. University of Washington isn't cheap." My father leaned forward, hands clasped on the table. "Christina, you're an intelligent, capable young woman. College is a luxury, not a necessity. If you want it, you can work for it. There are loan scholarships and part-time jobs. This is an opportunity for you to show your independence." The words felt like a physical blow. "But you're saving for Jackson's college. As we said, his situation is different." My mother repeated, a note of finality in her voice. He might not qualify for academic scholarships like you will. That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling a mixture of betrayal and uncertainty about my future. The dream that had seemed within reach suddenly appeared distant and hazy, not because of my abilities or dedication, but because of an arbitrary decision my parents had made without even discussing it with me. This was my first real experience with the inequality that would characterize my relationship with my parents for years to come. A seed of resentment was planted that day, though I tried to bury it under determination and hard work. Months later, when my acceptance letter from the University of Washington arrived, what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life was tinged with anxiety. I stood in our living room, the letter trembling slightly in my hands as I read it aloud to my parents. "Congratulations, Christina," my father said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Now comes the real test of seeing if you can make this work." My mother at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We're proud of you, honey. We really are." But their pride offered no financial support, no practical help with the mountain I now had to climb. As I looked at their faces that day, I realized I was truly on my own. The journey ahead would be entirely my responsibility, a fact that would shape not only my college experience, but my entire relationship with my family in the years to come. The summer before college was a blur of working double shifts and applying for every scholarship and grant I could find. By the time September arrived, I had cobbled together enough financial aid to cover about 60% of my first-year expenses. The rest would come from my savings and student loans. Moving to Seattle was both exciting and terrifying. I found a small apartment off campus that I shared with 4 other girls, all of us squeezed into a space designed for 3 at most. My room was barely larger than a closet, with just enough space for a twin bed and a desk I'd found on the side of the road. But it was mine, and it represented the beginning of my journey. That first semester hit me like a truck. I was taking a full course load of challenging classes while working 20 hours a week at the university library, and another 15 at a cafe near campus. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. My typical day started at 5:30 in the morning with a shift at the cafe before classes. I'd attend lectures until mid-afternoon, study in any spare moments, work at the library until closing. Then return to my apartment to continue studying until my eyes wouldn't stay open any longer. Weekends meant longer shifts and catching up on coursework I couldn't complete during the week. While my classmates attended football games and joined clubs, I was making espressos or shelving books. When they ordered pizza for late-night study sessions, I ate ramen noodles alone in my room. My textbooks were all secondhand, often previous editions that I had to cross-reference with current versions borrowed briefly from classmates. The financial strain was constant. Every purchase, no matter how small, required careful consideration. Do I really need this? Can I find it cheaper somewhere else? Can I do without it entirely? The mental math of survival became as automatic as breathing. During parent weekends and holidays, the differences between my situation and my peers became painfully obvious. The campus would fill with families taking their children to nice restaurants and helping set up their dorm rooms with new supplies. I'd watch from the library windows as I completed my shift, trying not to let envy consume me. One particularly difficult winter, my 12-year-old car finally gave up. The transmission failed completely on my way to work, leaving me stranded in the pouring rain. The repair estimate was $800, money I simply didn't have. Without a car, my 20-minute commute to the cafe turned into a 90-minute public transit journey each way. After calculating every possible budget scenario and finding no solution, I swallowed my pride and called my parents. It was the first time I'd asked them for anything since starting college. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "my car broke down, the transmission is shot. I was wondering if you could loan me $800 for the repair. I can pay you back $50 a month for my cafe job." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds before he responded. "Christina, these are exactly the kinds of challenges that build character. If we step in every time something goes wrong, how will you learn to solve problems on your own?" I could hear my mother in the background asking what was wrong and my father briefly explaining my situation. "But I can't afford to fix it, and I need my car to get to work," I explained, desperation creeping into my voice. There are buses in Seattle, aren't there? He asked. Plenty of people manage without cars. This is an opportunity to adapt and overcome. That's what successful people do. I ended the call shortly after sitting on my bed in my cold apartment, tears streaming down my face. That night marked a turning point. Through those tears, I made a promise to myself I would never put myself in a position where I needed their help again. I would succeed completely on my own, not to prove anything to them, but to prove to myself that I could. The next morning, I sold my broken car for parts, adjusted my work schedule to accommodate bus routes, and picked up additional tutoring hours to make up for the reduced cafe shifts. I survived not because of family support, but despite its absence. The one bright spot that emerged from this difficult period was meeting Professor Williams. She taught my data structures class and noticed my exhaustion during a morning lecture. After class, she asked me to stay behind. "You're one of my brightest students," she said, "but you look like you're running on fumes. Is everything all right?" Something about her genuine concern broke through my carefully constructed walls. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything. My financial struggles, my parents' refusal to help my grueling schedule. Instead of mere sympathy, Professor Williams offered practical help. She connected me with a paid research assistant position in her department that offered better pay than my cafe job with hours that worked around my class schedule. She also recommended me for an internship opportunity that would eventually change the trajectory of my college experience. That summer internship at a local tech company paid enough that I could finally quit the cafe job. For the first time since starting college, I could breathe a little easier. I still worked hard, still lived frugally, but the constant edge of financial panic had dulled slightly. By my junior year, I had established a reputation in the computer science department as both talented and tenacious. Professors sought me out for research projects, and my internship had turned into a recurring position. I still lived in a cramped apartment with too many roommates still calculated. The cost of every purchase still took on freelance coding projects whenever possible, but I was making it work. What my parents had framed as abandonment, I had transformed into independence. Not because they had taught me how, but because they had given me no other choice. My graduation day dawned bright and clear, a perfect Seattle spring day that seemed designed to mock my inner turmoil. I had invited my parents and brother, of course, but received only a brief text from my mother. "Sorry we can't make it. Dad has an important golf tournament this weekend. We're proud of you." No mention of the fact that Seattle was only a 3-hour drive from Portland. As I sat among my fellow graduates in my borrowed cap and gown, I watched families embracing taking photos, celebrating together. The empty seats I'd reserved remained vacant throughout the ceremony. When my name was called, the only cheers came from my roommates and Professor Williams, who had become more of a mentor than my parents had ever been. That night, rather than wallowing in self-pity, I channeled my emotions into application letters. I had completed my degree with honors, had excellent recommendations, and a portfolio of projects that showcased my abilities. Within 3 weeks, I had accepted a position at a promising tech startup in downtown Seattle. My starting salary wasn't spectacular, but it was enough to rent a tiny studio apartment all to myself. After years of shared spaces and compromise, having 400 square feet that was entirely mine felt like absolute luxury. I bought my furniture secondhand and gradually built a comfortable home, each piece representing my independence. The startup environment was intense, but exhilarating. I routinely worked 60-hour weeks, determined to prove myself. My background had taught me a work ethic that many of my colleagues couldn't match, and I advanced quickly. The struggle that my parents had imposed on me had inadvertently given me an edge in the competitive tech world. By my second year, I had received a significant promotion and pay increase. I started paying extra on my student loans each month, chipping away at the debt that had financed my education. I opened a retirement account and built an emergency fund, teaching myself financial literacy through books and online resources. The financial security I created for myself became a source of immense pride. While building my career, I also built a support network. Aisha, a fellow developer, and James, a product manager from the startup, became close friends who evolved into the chosen family I desperately needed. Unlike my biological family, they celebrated my successes without qualification, and offered support during setbacks without judgment. Aisha was the first to suggest therapy. "You've accomplished so much," she said during one of our coffee breaks, "but you still carry this weight. Have you ever thought about talking to someone about your family situation?" Initially, I dismissed the idea. My problems weren't that serious compared to what others faced. But the suggestion lingered, and eventually I made an appointment with Dr. Patterson, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. Those weekly sessions became a lifeline. Dr. Patterson helped me understand that my parents' behavior wasn't a reflection of my worth, but of their own limitations. She introduced me to concepts like emotional neglect and financial abuse that helped contextualize my experiences. Most importantly, she taught me that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary for my well-being. As my professional reputation grew, so did my confidence. I began attending industry conferences, networking events, and eventually speaking on panels about emerging technologies. Each accomplishment further validated that I hadn't needed my parents' financial support to succeed. I had done it all on my own. By 27, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small condominium in a developing neighborhood. The day I signed those mortgage papers, I felt a sense of achievement that went beyond the property itself. I had created stability from nothing. Throughout these years, my relationship with my parents had evolved into a distant surface-level connection. I visited Portland for major holidays called on birthdays and maintained the minimum contact that could reasonably be expected. During family gatherings, my parents would proudly tell relatives about my job in Seattle, bragging about my accomplishments as if they had contributed to them. "Our Christina always was independent," my father would say, patting my shoulder. "We taught her to stand on her own feet." I would smile tightly and change the subject, the hypocrisy burning in my chest. They had rewritten our history, casting themselves as supportive parents who had intentionally fostered my self-reliance rather than abandoned their responsibilities. My brother Jackson had followed a different path. With our parents' full financial support, he attended a state college, changed majors 3 times, and eventually graduated with a degree in communications. He moved back to Portland after college and took a job at our father's company. His life had been entirely cushioned by the support mine had lacked. Strangely, this inequality didn't damage my relationship with Jackson. If anything, it brought us closer as adults. Over beers during one of my visits home, he confessed, "I don't know how you did it, Christina. I couldn't have managed college without Mom and Dad's help. What they did wasn't fair." His acknowledgement meant more than any apology my parents would never offer. It validated my experience and the injustice I had felt for so long. As I built my life in Seattle, I gradually learned to set boundaries in all my relationships. I began recognizing red flags, early toxic bosses, unfair work conditions, one-sided friendships, and addressing them promptly rather than enduring silently. The hard-won wisdom from my family experience translated into healthier relationships across all aspects of my life. "You don't owe anyone your suffering," Dr. Patterson would remind me in our sessions. It became a mantra I returned to whenever guilt or obligation threatened to override my boundaries. I was building a life based on my terms, healing from old wounds, and creating the security my parents had never provided. Then came the phone call that would test everything I had learned. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in April. I was enjoying a rare day of complete relaxation, lounging on my couch with a novel, when my phone rang. Seeing my father's name on the screen was unexpected. We typically spoke only when I initiated contact or on special occasions. "Christina," he said warmly when I answered, "how's my successful daughter doing?" The unusual cheerfulness immediately put me on alert. We exchanged pleasantries discussing the weather in our respective cities and my recent promotion. He asked detailed questions about my work, showing more interest in my career than he had in years. "That's wonderful, honey. Your mother and I always knew you'd do well for yourself," he said, the revision of history I'd grown accustomed to. "Speaking of careers, I've been thinking about making some changes myself." "Oh," I responded, waiting for whatever was coming next. "Yes, I'm considering an early retirement package. The pharmaceutical industry isn't what it used to be." He paused, and I could almost feel him gathering himself for the real purpose of the call. "Actually, I was hoping to get your financial advice. You've always been so good with money." The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had refused to help fund my education now wanted my financial expertise. Still, I cautiously engaged, wondering where this was headed. "What kind of advice are you looking for?" "Well," he began, his voice shifting to a more serious tone. "Your mother and I have had some investment setbacks recently. We put a significant amount into a business opportunity that didn't pan out the way we expected." My stomach tightened. I had a growing suspicion about the direction of this conversation. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said neutrally. "What kind of business was it?" "A real estate development, a colleague's project. It seemed like a sure thing." He sighed dramatically. "Long story short, we're in a bit of a cash flow situation at the moment. The bank is threatening foreclosure on the house if we can't make some back payments." And there it was, the real reason for this unexpected Sunday call. "That sounds serious," I said, keeping my voice even. "It is, but it's temporary, just a rough patch. We need about $30,000 to get current on the mortgage and cover some other pressing expenses. Once this blows over, we'll be back on our feet." $30,000. The amount hung in the air between us, more than a year's worth of my college tuition that they had refused to help with. "Christina," my father continued into my silence, "we wouldn't ask if we had any other options. We've already borrowed from our retirement accounts, but it's not enough. You're doing so well in your career, and family helps family." The familiar guilt trip wrapped in praise. I had heard variations of this approach throughout my childhood. "This is a lot to process," I said finally. "I'll need to think about it." "Of course, honey, take your time." His voice softened with relief, as if my non-refusal meant automatic agreement. "Though we do need to know by the end of the week. The bank won't wait much longer." Just as I was about to end the call, he added casually, "Your brother would help if he could, but he's still paying off the student loans from his graduate program." I froze. Graduate program? I thought Jackson went straight to work after his bachelor's degree. Oh, did I not mention he completed his MBA last year? We helped with most of it, of course, just like his undergraduate degree. It was tight financially, but education is important. My hand tightened around the phone. "You fully funded Jackson's college and his MBA." There was an uncomfortable pause. "Well, yes. His situation was different, as we've discussed before." The familiar justification rang hollow. All the years of struggle, working multiple jobs while studying, the sleepless nights, and constant financial stress. All while my parents had the means to help, but chose not to. And now they expected me to bail them out of financial troubles they had created themselves. "I need to go," I said abruptly, my heart racing and palms sweating. "I'll call you back after I've had some time to think." I ended the call and sat in stunned silence in my living room, memories of my college years flooding back. The weight of what they were asking, the sheer audacity of it, left me breathless. Later that evening, I called Aisha and James, inviting them over for an emergency friendship intervention. Sitting around my small dining table, I recounted the conversation with my father. "The absolute nerve," Aisha said, shaking her head in disbelief. "After everything they put you through." But James, always the more measured of the two, asked, "Do you feel any obligation to help them?" "That's what I can't figure out," I admitted. "They're my parents, but this feels like another example of the same pattern they've always shown. They expect me to sacrifice while they don't do the same for me." "Have you verified their story?" Aisha asked. "Maybe the situation isn't exactly as they've presented it." It was a good point. The next day I called my brother ostensibly to catch up, but really to gather information. What he told me confirmed my suspicions. "Yeah, they made some really risky investments," Jackson explained. "Dad got involved with this guy planning to build luxury condos in an undeveloped area. Mom tried to talk him out of it, but you know how he gets when he thinks he's found a get-rich-quick scheme." "So it wasn't just an unexpected downturn?" I asked. "No, it was a gamble, pure and simple. They put in most of their savings, even took out a second mortgage. I told them it was a bad idea." This wasn't a case of unavoidable hardship or bad luck. It was the result of poor decisions, the kind my father had always insisted I should face the consequences of on my own. The irony was staggering. The week following my father's call was one of the most emotionally turbulent of my adult life. I oscillated between anger, guilt, and confusion. Should blood ties override the years of unequal treatment? Was I obligated to help the parents who had refused to help me? What would refusing to loan them money say about me as a person? I barely slept, lying awake reviewing memories of my childhood and college years, searching for justification either way. During the day, I went through the motions at work, my mind constantly returning to the decision looming before me. In my regularly scheduled therapy session, I laid out the entire situation for Dr. Patterson. Christina, she said, after listening intently, what would you tell a friend in this exact situation? I considered the question. I'd probably tell them they don't owe their parents money, especially given the history, that setting boundaries is healthy. And why is it harder to give yourself that same advice? Because they're my parents. I said, the automatic response feeling insufficient even as I said it. Because I'm supposed to help family. Says who? Dr. Patterson challenged gently. Who defined that obligation for you? The question hit me hard. The sense of obligation I felt had been instilled by the very people who hadn't felt obligated to help me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't help them, Dr. Patterson continued. That's entirely your decision. But I want you to make that decision based on your values and boundaries, not on guilt or manipulation. That evening, I decided to do some research. If my parents truly faced foreclosure, what options did they have? Besides asking me for money, I spent hours online reading about loan modification programs, forbearance options, and other alternatives to foreclosure. What I discovered confirmed what I had begun to suspect: my parents had options. They could sell their house and downsize. They could negotiate with their lender. They could explore bankruptcy protection if things were truly dire. The $30,000 loan they wanted from me wasn't their only solution. It was simply the easiest one, the one that required no sacrifice or change on their part. Meanwhile, I calculated what a $30,000 loan would mean for me. I had worked hard to build my emergency fund and was saving for potential future needs like advanced degrees or eventually starting a family. Lending such a large sum would set those plans back significantly. And given my parents' history of financial decisions, I had serious doubts about their ability or intention to repay me. The emotional weight was even heavier than the financial considerations. If I agreed to the loan, I would be reinforcing the uneven dynamic that had characterized our relationship for years. I would be saying, in effect, that their treatment of me was acceptable. One sleepless night, I found myself digging through old boxes in my closet. Among them was a journal I had kept during my second year of college, when things had been particularly difficult. I opened it to a random page. Worked double shift today. So tired I could barely focus in class. Professor asked if I'm okay, said I look exhausted. Can't tell him the truth that I had to choose between the textbook and eating this week. Chose the textbook. Ramen for dinner again. Called home yesterday. Mom talked about their cruise next month. Didn't mention I'm struggling. What's the point? They've made their position clear. Reading those words written by my younger self, I felt a surge of protective anger. That girl had deserved support and had received none. Now, years later, I was being asked to support the very people who had left her to struggle alone. I created a list of pros and cons, trying to approach the decision logically. Pros of giving the loan: might preserve relationship with parents, could potentially be paid back someday, would help them keep their house, aligns with general value of helping family. Cons of giving the loan: sets back my financial goals, likely won't be repaid based on their history, enables financially irresponsible behavior, reinforces unhealthy family dynamics, crosses a boundary I've worked hard to establish. Looking at the list, the decision became clearer. This wasn't about revenge or holding a grudge. It was about recognizing patterns, protecting myself, and establishing healthy boundaries. The moment of clarity came during a morning run along the Seattle waterfront, as I watched the sun rise over the mountains. A thought crystallized. I wasn't responsible for my parents' choices, just as they had repeatedly told me they weren't responsible for supporting my education. They had made their decisions, and now they needed to face the consequences, just as I had faced mine. I would offer financial planning help resources for dealing with their mortgage company, perhaps even assistance finding a financial advisor, but I would not give them the loan. Having made my decision, I felt a weight lift. The next challenge would be communicating this boundary to them in person. I scheduled a visit to Portland that weekend, giving myself time to prepare for what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation. The night before meeting my parents, I wrote out talking points to keep myself focused and calm during what would likely be an emotional discussion. I practiced in front of the mirror, working through various scenarios and potential reactions. This wasn't about winning an argument or punishing them. It was about standing firm in a decision that honored my own well-being. As I packed my overnight bag, I tucked my college journal inside, a reminder, if my resolve wavered, of why this boundary was so important. I suggested meeting at a coffee shop rather than my parents' house, wanting neutral territory for the difficult conversation ahead. The cafe I chose was quiet and had secluded corners where we could talk privately, yet public enough that it might moderate extreme reactions. I arrived early, selecting a table in the back and ordering a latte to calm my nerves. When my parents walked in, their expressions were a mixture of hope and anxiety. My mother hugged me warmly while my father gave my shoulder a squeeze. We exchanged pleasantries about my trip down and the unusually nice weather before the conversation inevitably turned to the reason for our meeting. "Have you had time to think about what we discussed?" my father asked, leaning forward, slightly confidence evident in his posture. He clearly expected a positive response. "I have," I replied, taking a deep breath. "I've given it a lot of thought and I've decided I can't provide the loan you're asking for." The shift in their expressions was immediate. My father's face hardened, while my mother's fell in disappointment. "I want to explain my reasoning," I continued before they could respond. "When I was struggling through college, working multiple jobs and barely sleeping, I asked for help with a car repair that cost $800. You told me that facing challenges builds character, and that I needed to solve my own problems." "That was different," my father interjected, his voice sharp. "You were young, learning life lessons." "I was 19 and exhausted," I corrected. "And now you're facing financial challenges because of investment decisions you made. Based on what you taught me, this is an opportunity for you to adapt and overcome, isn't it?" My father's face flushed with anger. "How dare you throw our words back at us? We're talking about losing our home, not some old car." "I understand the severity of your situation," I said, working to keep my voice level. "I've researched some options that might help. There are loan modification programs you could potentially sell and downsize. Or there's even Chapter 13 bankruptcy that would allow you to keep your house while reorganizing your debts." "We don't need financial advice from our daughter," my father snapped. "We need family support in a crisis. This isn't the time for you to hold grudges about college." "This isn't about grudges," I said firmly. "It's about patterns and boundaries. You chose not to help me when you could have. That was your right. Now I'm choosing not to put my financial security at risk. That's my right." My mother, who had been quiet until now, reached for my hand across the table. "Christina, honey, we know college was hard for you, but we always believed in you. We knew you could do it on your own. This is different. We're older, we don't have the same opportunities to start over." "You have a comfortable retirement account," I replied, referencing information Jackson had shared. "And your house has significant equity despite the mortgage issues. You have options. I've printed out some resources for you." I slid a folder across the table that they both ignored. "This is how you repay us for raising you," my father asked, his voice rising slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. "After everything we did for you, I'm grateful for many things you gave me," I acknowledged. "But I'm not responsible for bailing you out of financial decisions I had no part in making, especially when you weren't willing to support me when I needed it." "So this is revenge," my father said flatly. "No, it's a boundary. There's a difference." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "What will we tell people if we lose the house? How will we face our friends?" "The same thing you told them when your daughter was working herself to exhaustion to pay for college, I suppose," I replied, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. My father pushed his chair back abruptly. I always knew you were stubborn, but I never thought you'd be selfish. Family helps family, Christina. That's how it works. Selectively, it seems, I replied. Look, I care about you both. I'm willing to help research options, speak with financial advisors, even help you pack if you decide to downsize. But I won't give you money I can't afford to lose. My father stood up, his expression cold. Then I don't think we have anything more to discuss. If you can't help us in our time of need, then perhaps we need to reconsider what family means. Until you change your mind, don't bother coming home for Christmas. I won't have an ungrateful child at my table. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. My mother looked torn, clearly uncomfortable with his declaration, but unwilling to contradict him. If that's how you feel, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the emotions churning inside me, I hope you'll reconsider and look at the resources I've brought. My offer to help in other ways stands. I stood and gathered my bag. I love you both, but I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm. Not anymore. With that, I walked out of the coffee shop, tears blurring my vision, but my steps firm. For the first time in my adult life, I had set a clear, unambiguous boundary with my parents. The pain was acute, but beneath it was a sense of rightness that assured me I had made the necessary choice. The drive back to Seattle was emotional but clarifying. By the time I reached my condo, I felt drained but resolute. I had expected to feel guilty, but instead, I felt an unexpected lightness. The burden of unmet expectations and unacknowledged injustice had been lifted. The weeks that followed were difficult. My mother sent occasional text messages, brief and guilt-laden. Dad is still upset. The bank called again. We might have to sell the house. Each one was designed consciously or not to make me reconsider my decision. My father maintained his silence except for one email with the subject line, "Your decision," which contained only one sentence. When you realize what family truly means, you know where to find us. The most surprising reaction came from Jackson. Initially, he sent angry texts defending our parents. But after a long phone conversation where I explained my perspective and reminded him of the differential treatment we'd received, his tone changed. I never thought about it that way, he admitted. I guess I always saw your independence as a choice, not something forced on you. I'm sorry, Christina. For what it's worth, I think you're right to set boundaries, even though it's hard for all of us. His understanding meant more than I could express. Throughout the family turmoil, my support network proved invaluable. Aisha and James checked in regularly, offering both emotional support and welcome distractions when the family situation became overwhelming. Dr. Patterson helped me process the guilt and doubt that occasionally surfaced, reinforcing that my decision came from a place of self-respect, not spite. During this period, I wrote an anonymous blog post about my experience detailing the years of financial inequality and the recent loan request without identifying details. The post unexpectedly went viral, generating hundreds of comments from people in similar situations. Many thanked me for putting words to their experiences and giving them courage to examine their own family dynamics. One comment particularly resonated with me. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to take advantage of you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say no. As months passed, I received word through Jackson that our parents had decided to sell their house and downsize to a condo. The sale provided enough equity to clear their debts and give them a fresh start exactly as I had suggested originally. They had managed to solve their problems without my financial assistance, just as I had managed college without theirs. The first holiday season after our confrontation was challenging. True to his word, my father did not invite me for Christmas. Instead, I spent the day with Aisha and her large, welcoming family, who treated me like one of their own. Later, James and I volunteered at a local shelter serving meals. Though different from traditional family celebrations, it felt meaningful and aligned with my values. In January, I received a carefully worded email from my mother expressing a desire to move forward as a family. Reading between the lines, I understood this as an attempt to restore contact without acknowledging the issues that had caused our rift. My father had added a brief postscript: "We should put this unpleasantness behind us." There was no apology, no recognition of the patterns I had identified, just an expectation that I would fall back into the established family dynamic. I responded with kind but firm boundaries, making it clear that while I was open to rebuilding our relationship, it would need to be on new, healthier terms. The journey toward healing wasn't linear or quick. In many ways, it's still ongoing. The rupture with my parents forced me to confront and process years of built up resentment, but it also opened space for genuine growth and change. In the beginning, the pain was acute. Despite knowing I had made the right decision, there were moments of doubt and sadness. Birthdays and holidays were particularly difficult. Social media became a minefield of family celebrations that highlighted what I had chosen to step away from. Dr. Patterson helped me understand that I was experiencing a form of grief not just for the current estrangement, but for the supportive family relationship I had never truly had. "You're mourning both what you lost and what you never had in the first place," she explained. "That's a complex form of grief that deserves acknowledgement." This framing helped me be gentler with myself during the difficult days. I created new rituals and traditions surrounding myself with people who respected my boundaries and valued my presence in their lives. Gradually, my relationship with my parents began to shift. After 6 months of minimal contact, my mother reached out with a different tone. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she wrote in a lengthy email. "I didn't want to see it before, but there was a difference in how we treated you and Jackson. It wasn't fair, and I'm sorry for my part in that." It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of everything that had happened, but it was a start. My father took longer to come around his pride, making it difficult for him to admit any wrongdoing. Eventually, though, he too made overtures, inviting me to lunch when he was in Seattle for a business trip. That lunch was awkward, but important. Neither of us directly addressed the loan request or its aftermath, but he listened more than he spoke, asking questions about my life and work with what seemed like genuine interest. It was a small step, but a significant one. Our relationship now exists within careful boundaries. I visit Portland occasionally, call regularly, but maintain an emotional distance that protects me from falling back into unhealthy patterns. My parents have never again asked for money, though, whether that's from respect for my boundaries or lingering resentment over my refusal. I can't say for certain. My brother Jackson has become an unexpected ally in this new family configuration. Having witnessed the consequences of our parents' unequal treatment, he's become more aware of the dynamics at play. "You've changed how I see everything," he told me during a recent visit to Seattle. I can't believe I didn't notice it before. Our relationship has deepened into a true friendship based on mutual respect and shared experiences, rather than just familial obligation. He's even started setting his own boundaries with our parents, refusing to be the default emotional support when they're upset with me. Throughout this process of family reconfiguration, my professional life continued to flourish. The confidence that came from standing firm in my boundaries translated into more assertiveness at work. I negotiated a significant promotion, led major projects, and eventually moved to a larger tech company with better opportunities for advancement. With financial security firmly established, I began looking for ways to support others facing situations similar to what I had experienced. I started mentoring students in the computer science department at the University of Washington, with a particular focus on those working their way through college without family support. Seeing these bright, determined young people reminded me of my younger self, and I found immense fulfillment in offering the guidance and encouragement I had lacked. For 3 students who showed exceptional promise but severe financial need, I established a small scholarship fund that covered textbooks and emergency expenses. When I was in your position, I told one particularly stressed student who was working 3 jobs, "I would have given anything for someone who understood what I was going through. You're not alone in this." The healing power of these connections surprised me. By helping others navigate their challenging journeys, I was also processing my own past experiences in a constructive way. As I approached 30, I looked back on the difficult decision I had made with my parents and recognized it as a turning point. By choosing self-respect over obligation, I had transformed from someone who endured unfairness to someone who established healthy boundaries. That shift affected every aspect of my life, from romantic relationships to friendships to workplace dynamics. I came to understand that family is not defined by blood alone, but by consistent support, mutual respect, and genuine care. My chosen family of close friends proved this repeatedly, showing up for me in ways my biological family often had not. Perhaps the most profound lesson was that saying no isn't selfish. It's often the most honest and ultimately loving choice for everyone involved. By refusing to enable my parents' financial irresponsibility, I forced them to find more sustainable solutions. By protecting my own well being, I became capable of offering more authentic support to others. The peace that comes from living aligned with your values is worth the temporary discomfort of setting boundaries. Learning to distinguish between genuine obligation and manipulative guilt trips has been liberating. I no longer twist myself into knots trying to meet unreasonable expectations. If you're facing a similar situation with family members who expect financial support, they never gave you, know that you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't easy, but it's necessary for building a life based on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. Your worth isn't determined by how much you sacrifice for others, especially those who weren't willing to make sacrifices for you. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? What helped you stay strong in your decision? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more authentic conversations about family dynamics and personal growth. Share this with someone who might need permission to prioritize their own well-being. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no.